All right. Good day, everyone, and welcome to this special edition of Insights webinar. It's special first and foremost because it's the 30th edition. If you're just joining us, you can, use your emojis to, clap or celebrate with us. You'll agree with me that any activity that has happened 30 times repeatedly is worthy of accolades. So it's the 30th edition, and we're excited. And much more importantly, this month is all about women. This month globally, there's the emphasis on celebrating women, talking about the challenges and, talking around the solutions, steps that need to be taken to ensure that we move the needle forward on issues pertaining to women. If you're just joining us, if this is the first time you're joining this webinar, this is Insights webinar put together by eHealth Africa. And the idea is to bring together public health professionals to discuss critical issues and explore ways to enhance healthcare delivery. My name is TJ Sojumu, and I'll be your moderator for today's discussion. So the International Women's Day is a global celebration, recognizing the achievements and contributions of women while emphasizing the need for gender equality. Despite progress, women remain underrepresented in key financial and investment decision-making spaces. The 2025 International Women's Day theme is Invest in Women, Accelerate Progress. This highlights the urgency of ensuring women not only benefit from financial and social opportunities, but actively lead and fund them. This special edition of Insights webinar will move beyond discussions to action, exploring how women can take leadership roles in finance, investment, and social impact. This month's webinar is proudly supported by eHealth Africa's People and Organizational Strategy Department. And we're honored to have the Deputy Director of our People and Organizational Strategy Department in person of Fozia Malik. And so I'll invite her to give us the opening remark. Thank you, Fozia Malik.
Thanks, TJ. So good afternoon, everyone. Happy to see all of you here. So as we embrace this year's global call to invest in women, accelerate progress, our focus moves beyond inclusion to transformation. Today, we will be exploring how women can lead, fund, and shape the very systems they have been long excluded from, challenging the status quo and building the future driven by equity and agency. We are honored to have with us a powerhouse panel of women leaders and gender experts who are not only shaping policies, but actively shifting paradigms across development, finance, and social enterprise sector. So I would want you all to be listening carefully to today's conversation, ask your questions, and then last but not least, act afterwards. So Tejesu, thank you so much for being the moderator. And now I hand it over to you for the introduction. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, Fozia. Thank you so much. All right. We're going to, the exciting part of this webinar. So today's panelists are leaders and experts in gender inclusion and development, and they've worked for many years to promote economic empowerment of women and social inclusion. I'm going to introduce them one after the other in no particular order. And when I introduce them, they're going to unmute their mic and say hello to the audience. So the first panelist that I'm going to be introducing, she's a visionary leader with significant experience leading and managing teams, a chartered administrator, and international finance corporation, learning and performance institute certified trainer. She's skilled at leading fundraising initiatives, cost control measures in managing budget, program management, motivating high-performing teams, and corporate governance. She's also a dynamic public speaker and a recognized business development service provider with Small and Medium Enterprises Development Agency of Nigeria. Ladies and gentlemen, please let us welcome Ms. Hansatu Adigbite.
Thank you very much for that introduction. A pleasure to meet everybody here. Gender is always on my agenda, so it's a privilege to be here at this International Women's Day month. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, man. We are excited to have you with us. All right, so the next person I'll be introducing is also a seasoned gender equality and social inclusion expert. She's renowned as a consultant, author, keynote speaker, and portfolio lead. She's a published author, like I rightly said, and continues to lead initiatives that foster equitable opportunities and sustainable development. She is passionate about driving positive change and leveraging her skills to create inclusive and equal opportunities. One of her notable achievements include leading the financial education training of over 800 women in the EDC Sherry Blair ExxonMobil Road to Growth program. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome with me, Miss Ibukun Omololu.
Thank you, Tijasumi. It's a pleasure to be here. I look forward to interacting with you some more. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Our third panelist today is an international development expert with over 2 decades of experience in gender and social inclusion. She's deeply committed to leading meaningful impact at the intersection of gender, policy, and development. One of her key outstanding achievements is development of a comprehensive 10-year strategy to prevent gender-based violence in West Africa. She successfully raised awareness and drives stakeholder commitment to prioritizing prevention as a response. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome with me, Miss Olufunke Barua. Ms. Olufunke, please unmute. You can unmute your mic.
Thank you very much, Jesu. Deeply honored to be here. I'm looking forward to speaking with my fellow panelists.
All right. Thank you very, very much. We're excited to have you with us. And if you're just joining, I want to welcome you again to Insights webinar. Before we hear from the experts, our team put together a powerful video showcasing how women are redefining the word impossible. So watch this short video that will come back and then we'll dive into the conversation proper. Don't go anywhere.
Impossible. A wall we're told to offer. A wall we're never meant to climb. A door that was locked before we even knocked. But we defined it.
They said women don't belong here.
They said you can't lead. They said tech, science, innovations, these aren't for you. We chose not to listen.
We stepped forward.
Asked the question no one's there to. Built solutions, not just dreams.
Wrote an answer they never expected.
We turned impossible into I am possible. We are women in leadership, women in tech, women in science, in medicine, in innovation. We code, we cure, we create. We redefine what it means to lead.
The future isn't waiting for us to be ready. We are already here.
And we are
redefining impossible.
All right. I mean, if we were in the same space, I think we can still put, our hands together using your emoji, and wherever you are, where you're watching from, I think that video just naturally evokes, an applause. And it will interest you to know that that video also was put together by those same ladies, short edited by them, a wonderful set of people working with us at eHealth Africa. All right, so we'll be going, straight into the question and answer segment. And the first question that I have is this, and it goes to, all our panelists. The theme of this year's International Women's Day is Invest in Women, Accelerate Progress. So I would like to know, what does this theme mean to you? And I think I'll start with Ms. Olufunke. Then I'll go to Ms. Hansatu and then Omololu. So what does this thing really mean to you?
Thank you, Tijesu. It's interesting, a very interesting theme for the 2025 International Women's Day. Every year we come up with different themes like this. The UN comes up with some of these things, and for me, they're not just rhetoric or just words. This particular one, Accelerate Progress, underscores first the pressing need that we need to expedite efforts towards achieving gender equality, and that we don't have time. And despite all the ongoing initiatives and the current projections that, indicate that full gender parity may not even be realized in another almost 200 years, I think to 2160, we are behind schedule. But for me, this highlights the necessity for more immediate and decisive action. So the theme itself comes at a critical period where there's a global call to dismantle systemic barriers, biases, that hinder women's progress in various spheres, including economic participation, political representation, access to education, and even healthcare. So it also emphasizes the importance of moving beyond the discussions that we always have on these days and in various meetings to now concretely implementing measures that foster inclusive and equitable society. So personally, for me, it's a reminder that achieving gender equality requires collective effort. It also requires swift and immediate action from everyone. It's a whole of society approach, including from individuals, from organizations and governments, and even the international community. It's actively encouraging us to, in our own spheres or circle of influence, to support initiatives that will promote women's advancement and to also challenge the status quo that perpetuates inequality. And we're seeing it playing out everywhere in the world, including in Nigeria. I believe that by so doing, we will all be able to contribute to creating a world where everyone, regardless of their gender, have equal opportunities to thrive. So this particular theme is really very personal, and it is critical, and there couldn't have been a better time. I mean, I'm sure as we go on, there'll be opportunities for us to talk about the backlash and the closing spaces for women, the misogyny, the patriarchy, all those things that we battle against. So it's time to really accelerate progress. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ma. I think something that stands out to me that you said is challenging the status quo that perpetuates inequality. That's such a strong word for us to ponder on. Thank you very much for sharing that. All right, Ms. Ansatu, what are your thoughts on the theme for this year?
I love to come from the economic perspective when we're looking at things around accelerating action, especially for women. I'm very big on women's economic power. And when I look at even our current state, especially in our nation, Nigeria, just like I always like to emphasize, they say at least 70% of Nigerians are multidimensionally poor. And that was based on the research by the National Bureau for Statistics. And when you look at what that translates into, that's about 133 million Nigerians. And this research was done about 2 or 3 years ago. And we all know that between that time and the current dispensation that we're in, things have escalated to be 10 times worse. And anytime you see there's multidimensional poverty, you know that women are at the highest scale when it comes to the numbers of those multidimensionally poor. And globally, we do understand that at least 380 million women are living in real poverty spaces. And so for me, when we talk about accelerating action, I always say that if you want to stifle the growth of any society, you need to start hammering on the economic power of their women. And the UN women have also highlighted in their own women's economic empowerment policy 3 critical areas that once those areas are not in place, the women in any society will never find themselves having that power. Number 1, obviously, is resources. Remove the ability for women to have economic resources or even own things like lands and so on and so forth. You have removed economic power from their hands. Remove power itself. So we're talking about our autonomy, our agency, our decision-making power, and our leadership power. Once you remove that, again, a lot of us are under-misrepresented. And then obviously our systems, our norms, and our practices and our policies. So for me, to accelerate action means we need to accelerate action in these 3 areas and make sure that we domesticate things to the advantage of women. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ma. Yeah, like you rightly said, economic empowerment, economic representation, very, very important, very important. Thank you very much for sharing that. Ms. Ibukun, we also like to hear from you. What does the theme mean to you?
Thank you very much, Tijasumi. I think in terms of accelerating action, you know, a lot of progress has been made in gender equality in the last 50 years. And at the same time, there has been some level of regression at the same time. When you think about the impact of COVID-19 on gender equality, when you think about how it exacerbated gender-based violence in terms of the women who were trapped with their abusers at home, in terms of the number of girls who had to, be out of school, you can see that a lot of the progress we made was somewhat regressed, right? And so accelerate action for me is really looking at what has worked in the last 50 years and what has not worked, and how can we, scale up the impact of what has worked, particularly the places where we've made progress. And I think Funke and Ansatu have really spoken to a number of it. And you can see even in times past with the refinement of the gender strategy by IFC, where they actually enumerated some of the things that Ansatu had spoken on: agency, on land, and including men as well, because we also see that we cannot do this without men. So it's really about looking at it like what has really worked and how can this be scaled in such a way that is impactful. And that can also be done in 2 ways. Women looking at it personally, like what can I do for myself to accelerate progress, right? Or accelerate action for myself. If you see a new job you want to apply for it. If you see there's something you don't know, maybe financial literacy or sexual harassment, you can learn it. And concrete steps really for organization. What is not working in the organization? What has worked better? How does it impact on the bottom line, particularly for women when we talk about gender equality and all of that? So it's very, very important that we're able to bring a structured approach to this and bring out concrete steps that work for us, particularly what has worked, and to also learn from our mistakes. So that's what accelerate action.
All right, thank you very much for sharing that. If you're just joining us, again, I'd like to welcome you to Insights webinar. And we have 3 powerful women, and we're discussing what it takes to move women from being just beneficiaries to sitting at the table and taking decisions. And they've been talking to us about what the theme of this year's International Women's Day means to them personally. So in sharing, my next question is going to go to Ms. Olufunke. In sharing what the theme means to you all, one thing everyone has in common is the fact that there is still so much to be done. And so my question is this: how do we achieve a paradigm shift from where we are right now to ensure women are not just beneficiaries, but leaders in defining what their needs are and driving meaningful change?
Thank you, TJ. And, my colleagues have said a lot of things, some of the issues that we're dealing with, and the fact that even though we've made some progress, there still has to be laws, policies, regulatory frameworks, and even systemic change, in terms of attitudes around for meaningful change for gender equality. But in terms of achieving a paradigm shift, like I mentioned earlier, I said we need a whole of society approach. For long, the issue of women's voice, agency, and power has been left in the hands of women's groups or women activists and the rest. But unless we have a whole of society approach where we're looking at a multifaceted systemic approach, we will not get there. And we don't have the luxury of over almost 200 years. We don't have that luxury as women. as men even, because this issue does not just affect women alone. So for that kind of paradigm shift, you know, a whole of society approach, a systemic approach, a multi-pronged approach, you know, we're looking at starting from even shifting some of the narratives that we use, or some of the lingua that we use, you know, from an example is empowerment, which we always use, to leadership and agency. And I talked about the 3 principles of voice, power, and agency, where we need to reframe this narrative, you know, and move. Hello? And move.
Yes, we can hear you.
I thought I lost you. And move beyond seeing women as passive recipients of aid or empowerment programs, to really recognizing that women bring a lot to the table as experts and as decision makers. And for me, this would, you know, for me mean consciously elevating stories, you know, of women that need change, rather than focus on women, on the vulnerabilities of women. That doesn't mean we'll put the vulnerabilities of women at the back burner, because those are equally important, but we need to begin to reframe these narratives. The second thing is, you know, under, you know, this shifting from empowerment to leadership and agencies, trust women's expertise. We need to trust that women have the lived experiences of the issues that they talk about, and that they play a central role in both designing and implementing and also evaluating programs that are meant to support them. And rather than, you know, it being other people are the ones driving this change. And then the second thing would be inclusion, participation, especially in decision-making processes. We're still very far along. In fact, our numbers keep dropping by the day, or by every election year. But we need to begin to institutionalize women's leadership. That's the only way that we can move forward, especially from women from marginalized groups, you know, women with disabilities, for instance. And so this institutionalization cuts across governance structures, policy-making bodies, and even in development programs. Thirdly, we need to redistribute power and resources. I know this will strike a raw nerve for many, but that has to happen, because even for women-led organizations, and, you know, statistics show that only about 1% of donor money comes to gender equality and women's empowerment programs. So that there is need for direct, flexible, sustainable funding for women-led and grassroots-led organizations who really do the work in this area. So that reform in shifting donor frameworks from, you know, top-down project to community-led and participatory approaches are important. And then there is that need to tackle the legal, economic, and social barriers that prevent women from accessing leadership positions. And that will mean dismantling these systemic barriers, whether in leadership, in governance, in business. I know my sister Hansatu will talk about those barriers in the business side, and my other sister Malulu will probably also enunciate on that. And then there is the investment in capacity building and collective power. One, we need to begin to look at how mentorship pipelines, programs, and collective advocacy is going to help us create the kind of leadership that we want, by investing in mentorship, training, and networking opportunities for women across sectors, and supporting collective advocacy to strengthen the women's movement. We can see in the last couple of days what has happened in Nigeria, just the sheer strength of collective advocacy, the kind of move that we've had. One final one that really needs to work is that we really need to focus on is to challenge cultural norms and bias. We thought that we were way over some of these issues, but what's been happening in the last couple of weeks, months, years, says that we still have a lot of work to do to change social attitudes. We still need a lot of work on engaging communities and traditional religious and cultural leaders through public campaigns and education to really shift cultural norms and bias and negative stereotypes around women's leadership, women's agency, and all that. So finally, it's about intersectional approaches that, you know, center the diverse voices of women from all identities, and also to begin to challenge this institutional and systemic bias through laws. What are we doing even in, for example, in the National Assembly? It's very clear that there is systemic bias. There is that entry barrier even to get into those spaces. And unless we're in those spaces and positions of power where we can really influence change, we're going to remain on the sidelines and be screaming ourselves for us when we're not in those positions of influence that we can really make change happen. And those who are gatekeepers of these processes ensure that the gates continue to be closed and shut against us, because they know that once we can get to the table, we will be able to make those decisions. So for me, it's a whole basket or buckets of interventions that need to move together for that paradigm shift to happen.
All right, thank you. Thank you very much. Just very elaborate answer. You mentioned quite a number of things, including reframing narratives, trusting women's expertise, the need for flexible funding for women intervention, challenging cultural norms and bias. And I like how you've been able to give a broad, overview to all of this things. So now, my next question will need us to streamline, these responsibilities further. And this is taking me to Ms. Hansatu. So what is the role of state actors? Now we've had Ms. Olufuke talk, about a lot of things that we need to do. But in this plethora of, possible actions, what is the role of state actors, including the private sector, in making this shift happen?
Okay, so I do align with what my sister Funke has said, especially looking at, of course, the systematic approach to things. And I think it's really multi-sectoral and multi-dimensional. So what I'll start with is, of course, we know that we have the private, the public sector. We also have the social sector. And obviously, under that social sector, we have all our non-profit organizations, our religious organizations, and all our communities, and so on and so forth. So when I look at the approach to address some of these things, yes, with government, we know that government has a responsibility for policy and legal frameworks. We have so many policies that have been done over the years. Our challenge is the domestication and the implementation of these policies. Again, government does quite a lot of things, but I think we have not been good in communicating effectively some of these things and just sensitizing that sensitization nationally, and orienting that orientation so that people are sort of on the same page. And I think it has happened over time. If you look at the private sector, for example, if they do something, everybody will know that they're doing something because they have different approaches to communicating that to the general public. But the truth of the matter is that there's nothing that the government or the public sector is doing that will be as effective as can be if it is not in partnership with the private sector. So let me start with the private sector. The private sector has a great capacity and ability to help with all manner of resources. And so when we talk about resources, most people think it's about financial resources, but no, we're looking at the skill sets and the education, the capacity. We have seen, even in the private sector, some of these approaches that Funke has listed. The private sector have gotten it right within the context of their own institutions. So, for example, we can see what is happening in the financial sector or the banking and finance sector. The truth of the matter is that the reason the banking sector or the financial sector today can boast of a lot of women in leadership is because a policy was put in place. And before that policy was put in place, there was a lot of advocacy around it. And then we were very lucky enough to have a strong male ally in leadership who was challenged and motivated enough to be able to put that policy in place through the Central Bank of Nigeria. So no needle will shift for you automatically. It was systematic. Now, this policy was put in place about 15 years ago. Today, we're reaping the benefits and the fruit of that policy. But you see, that policy could have been sitting on the shelf. And now we wouldn't be able to boast about the number of women we have as both CEOs and chairmen of banks. So that, for me, is something that we can learn from across different sectors. The second thing I have seen, which is even very important, is that yes, the government has become a bit more sensitive to all the inclusion of gender and some diversity, especially with persons with disabilities, in most of these their policies. But we need drivers to ensure that it is done. I give you an example. We have the former Minister of Women Affairs who really drove having gender desks across all the public sector agencies and ministries. But the truth of the matter is that right now, a lot of them have not been equipped to continue to drive whatever they need to drive to ensure that they are at par with what we need to do to institutionalize some of these women in leadership agendas. Again, with the private sector, they can invest in a lot of gender equality or gender equity partnerships with the public sector. We've seen it in workplace policies for them, which they can also help with some professional guidelines for the public sector. But I will also conclude by saying that it is very important for us to understand the data that exists and also leverage on developing a lot of gender aggregated data. That's one of the areas that we are lacking. I'm happy that eHealth is also a data focused type of organization. So even eHealth can help the public sector in partnership in an area to teach them how to really grasp data and also use data for decision making and then to be able to measure impact. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ma. And thank you for putting that challenge to eHealth Africa. I think it's really important, as you rightly said. Thank you. Thank you. Going to the next panelist, which is Ms. Omololu. Based on your experience, what could be, so we've had Ms. Hansa to talk about some possible solutions, some things that can be done. Now, based on your own experience, what could be the potential barriers to achieving this transformation? She cited while she was talking the transformation in the banking sector as as an important case study. So now, based on your own experience, what could be the potential barriers to being able to replicate this type of transformation across various sectors, in Nigeria?
Excuse me, sorry. Thank you, and I think that is such a great question. So first of all, I would say it's in different components, right? And I'll start from different components at different levels, at an individual level, at an organizational level, and then at societal or national level, right? So looking at the individual level, I think it would start first with the kind of cultural norms and societal barriers, as well as leadership barriers that we put around leadership, and basically how women define that. Oftentimes women don't see themselves as leaders, even when they are housewives and all. Even as a wife, you are a leader in your own right. It doesn't mean that you're the head of the home, right? But you are a leader in terms of how you're administering on the home front, or how you might be even budgeted in the house and all of that. And so women seeing themselves, first of all, as leaders can be a problem. And in seeing yourself as a leader, it really goes down to your self-efficacy, as well as what you were taught, how you were brought up, which leads me to socialization. So, and it's very important that you actually are brought up the right way, because we are all, we have ingrained beliefs that have been programmed into us from when we've been children to when we get to adults. And so people have different funny ideas about what leadership means. So this affects women. In fact, there are studies that have shown that women tend to underestimate their own capabilities compared to men because of the way they were raised. So if you don't see yourself as a leader, you will not go for those opportunities. You will not be ambitious to say, I'm going to do well in my career or in my field, I'm going to get the next job and all of that. And a clear example is even when it comes to recruitment, right? Sourcing and recruitment. We've seen in clear cases that women deselect themselves from applying for jobs because they have just 80% of the required skills, whereas men have just like 60%. That's the fractional amount of the requirements that is needed, but they apply for that job. And this starts with socialization. So if women cannot see themselves as leaders in the first place, it's a problem. And all of this starts with cultural and societal, which definitely needs to change. The next problem would be limited access to capital and network. And this is also because women may not necessarily thrive in the workplace, but we see that women actually do a lot in entrepreneurship. And as a matter of fact, there are more women in entrepreneurship in Nigeria, because the last time I checked, I think it was about 47% who were in formal jobs and being economically active that way. But when you look at it in terms of women entrepreneurs receive less than 3% of global venture capital funding, right? And it makes it difficult for them to, scale their businesses. Now, I believe that this is, improving, but at a very slow rate. So when people don't have access to capital, to network, to opportunities, because sometimes it's not all about the money. It's really about where do you get the opportunities, right? How do you get recommended for opportunities? How do you use the people in your social networks, right? And to get using your social capital in such a way that it works for you. So we need to have more gender-focused funds and investment vehicles that help bridge this gap. And it has to be really targeted, because I like to re-echo what Olufunke said. It has to be tailored, it has to be targeted. It's not just about empowerment. I kind of feel like we've kind of bastardized that word, for lack of a better word. And that word even brings in some form of learned helplessness when it comes to women. But being targeted to say, if we're going to do an empowerment program, we're not just doing this program because we feel women need it. No, we're doing this program because we know women have contributions to bring. We know women have the answers. And if you empower them and if you educate them this way, they're going to do better. So a big example of that is one of the initiatives we have at TO3 is called Women of Wealth. And it's financial literacy that is targeted basically at women being more financially intelligent, not just literate, financially intelligent, financially confident, and actually dismantling stereotypes that they've been brought up with. I was on a call with women from across Africa, and there was a particular country somewhere in Southern Africa. I don't want to mention the exact name in case I'm mistaken, but it was like a taboo for women to learn about money or to learn about finance. And so most of those decisions are taken for them. So and this is happening in the 21st century at this time. So limited access to capital, to networks, to education, to opportunities, all of this could actually affect it. And then lastly, I would say policy gaps and lack of representation. We've gotten to a stage where we don't just want to do things for women anymore. We want women to be part of the solution and the decision process, because they understand what they are going through and they're able to pave the way for other women. So how do we make policies, right, that address systemic barriers and helps women to thrive in leadership? And I'm not sure if it was Ansati that mentioned it, or Funke. Even when you consider the affirmative action, how well has that been done? We have less than 35% of global parliamentary seats held by women in Nigeria. How do we want to fix the policies, right? We know that there's an affirmative gap that has been done, but is it working sufficiently? What else needs to be done? Does it need to be revamped? There's also lack of representation. We've seen one of the situations that has gone on with one of the senators in the country right now, and what's going on in the Senate. And some of the things that came to my head was like, are there policies in place to address sexual harassment, even at the Senate level? Are there policies in place to mediate, to address, to mitigate, to report, to complain, to treat, to train, and to refresh them on all of these things? So if we do not put all of these things in perspective, they are definitely going to impact on the kind of outcomes or the results that we get. So I'll just stop there for now.
All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Boko. If you're just joining us, we're still discussing shifting women from beneficiaries to decision makers and investors in social impact and development. And if you have any question please use the Q&A box, put your questions, and we'll take them, at the end of this conversation. Thank you once again, Ms. Omololu. You've shared some of the potential barriers, some of what you shared. You said women not seeing themselves as leaders as a big challenge, limiting ingrained beliefs, limited access to capital and network, policy gaps, and the lack of representation. So now I'm going to put the next question to Ms. Olufunke. While Ms. Omololu has talked about some of these potential barriers, from your own perspective, what are the biggest barriers preventing women from accessing and leading in the digital economy? And how can they be addressed?
Thank you, TJ. So I think that technology is one of the best things that has really happened to the world, because it sort of provided a level playing field. And the advent of digital technology and its influence in the digital economy has sort of just, opened up the space, even for actors that will ordinarily not have the opportunity to participate in, certain businesses online. Yes, of course, but still, there are a lot of barriers that women face. And I've talked about, and almost in every case, these barriers are systemic or structural, depending on how you look at it. With all that is happening, even in the digital space, women still have the short end of the stick when it comes to digital access, in terms of the affordability gap, especially women in low and middle income countries. They face limited access to affordable digital devices and reliable internet. And you see, if you look at all the unicorns and all the businesses that have come out from Africa, how many of them are really led by women, apart from maybe HealthCap, led by Dr. Ola and a few other women. And in one of my articles, I talked about, I struggle to find as many women as possible who are doing amazing work in that sector. They're there, but sometimes the visibility is also not just there. So there's that digital access, and the affordability gap for many women in the digital economy. And it's a huge barrier. There's also the fact that, and I could talk about the solutions immediately, but maybe just to go through some of these issues first. The other gap is digital literacy. So many women, there are gender disparities we know in STEM, in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics education. And this limit women, the ability of women to participate in the digital economy. In many regions, especially in Africa, in Nigeria, for example, you still have cultural norms and stereotypes that discourage women from pursuing technical education, for going into technical fields. The normal thing is, girls leave school and they're just asked to go into the soft careers. There's not that much encouragement for girls to go into engineering, for girls to go into aerospace tech, for instance, computer science, and so on. So there's also that literacy gap. And to be able to close these two gaps, for instance, that I've talked about, so we don't lose that thought, is one is we need to begin to look at subsidizing access for a lot of women. And there are countries who have done that. India and Pakistan, for instance, are examples. And even in Rwanda, where subsidies are implemented, there are policies that have been implemented that offer affordable devices and data packages that target women and girls, and to encourage girls and women to go into this field. There's also public infrastructure. There's so many countries now where you have digital access points, in different parts of in community centers, in libraries that have free or low-cost internet. And then, upskilling initiatives, education, integrating gender-responsive digital literacy and STEM programs into early as into primary and secondary school curriculum, not when they get to university, and then mentorship programs. I'll always talk about gender bias because, it's something that is reoccurring across, the strata of things we want to talk about. So we have these persistent cultural stereotypes that continue to frame technology as a male-dominated field. And of course, that discourages women from pursuing digital leadership roles. There's also the fact that even for those women who are in these sectors, they face workplace discrimination and even unconscious bias. You hear the word tech bro, when you then say Texas, it looks like it's out of place. What are you doing in this place? So to shift that bias, you'll be looking at, inclusive workplaces, and then also promoting women who are role models and amplifying the stories of women who are leading, such successful digital initiatives. And I'm even, actually, after this, I'll probably be looking at documenting them. I'm sure we have many of them. There are so many other things like the financial exclusion. I think my sister Hansatu will be in a better place to talk about that if she wants to, add that to some of her points. There's that limited investment. There's a problem of online harassment, which is what I'll end with. That is another big concern. Gender-based violence online, cyber stalking, and all that discourages women's full participation in digital spaces. And so to ensure that women get into those places, we need to be looking at legal protections. There have to be laws that strengthen legal frameworks that criminalize and prosecute online harassment, and then platform accountability. Digital platforms can't just allow people to run wild, and use that space to harass women and girls out of those places. So those policies need to be put in place to protect women and girls and other vulnerable groups. So it's a holistic approach like we've talked about that will require, an intersectional lens, long-term investment, accountability, and government actually becoming more interested in that, mentorship and role models, and a host of other
All right.
things we can. Thank you. Back to you, TJC.
All right, thank you very much for sharing all of that. Something you said, which is going to be the basis for my next question. You had mentioned at the beginning of your answer that we do not have a lot of women-led social impact ventures and businesses, and so that leads me to ask this question to Ms. Hansatu. How can gender lens invest in? I think I'll also have Ms. Omololu also, chime in on this. How can gender lens investing and funding strategies help scale women-led social impact ventures and businesses?
I think for me, I'll just highlight maybe 3 areas that are critical. Number one, when we look at gender lens investing, I think a very critical area is gender responsive budgeting. Before you can even contribute money or invest something, you must budget for it. So whether nationally, whether it's at a state level, locally, or even within the private sector, there should be budgets that should be put in place that are gender responsive budgets, so that we begin to also address the issues of women when it comes to the social and business ventures. The other thing I would say is that gender affirmative procurement, which is focusing on procurement opportunities for women when it comes to a form of economic power. We do identify the fact that in Nigeria today, we do have budgets of over trillions when it comes to procurement opportunities, both within the private and the public sector. But again, less than 1% of women-owned businesses benefit from procurement opportunities. And if we have a large percentage of women that do business in Nigeria, and we're saying all the trillions of naira that is going through, and dollars and any other currency that is going through our procurement pipeline, are things they cannot benefit from. And the only kind of interventions we feel they deserve is for them to be doing soap making, getting sewing machine, grinding machine, and keeping us on that low level of business activities. We are not helping ourselves in any way. So for me, some of this gender lens investing should also be around areas of procurement where women can get sustainable and substantial kind of economic and income flow, so that they can benefit within the landscape of national and economic development. So for me, when I say affirmative procurement, what we are saying is that even as governments and organizations, we should put a policy in place that at least 30% of women-owned businesses should be part of those on the procurement landscape. The last thing I will add is that when we look at our supply chain, our access to markets, our access to capital and access to finance, all these areas are areas that our gender lens impacting obviously will make a difference. So when we are doing things, and you look at even the global trade that is going on and after in Nigeria, in Africa, for example, we need to also ensure that women are significant beneficiaries of this and also build their capacity to be able to achieve that. I conclude by just saying that an example of what I'm saying is that when you look at any kind of policy, if you know that women are not prepared for that policy, for example, affirmative procurement, women are not even prepared for procurement, then you can invest in also building their capacity to know how they should prepare for that. And I know the World Bank and the UN have helped in that regard. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Matt. That's an innovative, what you call it, idea. I hope that, stakeholders, key decision makers are listening and, they can take this idea forward. Thank you very much, Ma. We're racing against time now, but I would still like Ms. Mololu to just maybe within 2 minutes, just quickly add to this. What's your own perspective around gender lens investing and funding strategies?
Thank you. So gender lens investing it's designed in such a way to channel capital towards businesses that promote gender equality. And it doesn't necessarily mean investing in only women, but rather it's a lens through which you can access the businesses that you want to invest in and increase opportunities for women to access capital. I think one of the ways it's changing the landscape where you can do more is that it's steadily growing. And in the last, as of 2023, about $6 billion had been raised for gender lens investing, and it's growing with a number of funders who are looking to do more, right? From DFIs to agencies to philanthropies who are looking to support women-led businesses or women-owned businesses. So I think another way that it's helping to scale is that it allows the businesses to tap into a significant market opportunity and access international markets, basically because the investors are mostly foreigners, they understand it, they're ready to put in the funds to back it. It allows women also to access new sources of capital or foreign investors, and it ensures sustainability, because when it comes to gender lens investing, they're very specific on the impact and the measurement. And so there are resources like the 2X criteria that is very focused on entrepreneurs or women at leadership positions. So it also helps to tackle gender inequality and discriminations in the workplace. And what I would just quickly want to say before I drop off would be like, for organizations who are looking for who are looking to do more in the gender investments space, it's very important to develop women-designed solutions, products and services, not for women, but women-designed solutions. My experience has shown that when you design products with women in mind, it not just works for women, it also works for any other person, men, children, and all. And so it's very important, particularly for financial institutions, okay, to also use this model in designing funding models tailored to women entrepreneurs, including flexible loan structures, mentorship programs, as well as incentive models, right? And I think Goldman Sachs is an example of one of the organizations doing it. And then the last thing I'll say is to embed gender inclusive criteria. Again, you cannot go wrong with using the 2X criteria because it integrates gender-specific metrics into funding decisions. Decisions such as who are the members of the management team, who is the How is this company classified as a women-led business or a women-owned business? Who are the people taking decisions? Diversity issues in terms of the number of staff. What is the women to men ratio? What are your policies like? So it basically comes at the policy, the process, the institution level, and sometimes it goes into even the product. And I think that it's such a great way to go for a lot of organizations.
All right, thank you very much. We have less than 5 minutes, and I'd like to be able to, take 1 or 2 questions. So what we're going to do is that we're just going to be, very quick with the answers. So I have a question here, and I think it's an opportunity to be more direct because I know that, I think you must have touched it, in the last few minutes speaking. So as a young girl who dreams of making a difference, many leadership spaces are still dominated by men. How can young women like me break barriers, gain confidence, and ensure our voices are heard in global development? I feel like this question is an opportunity to be maybe a bit more direct and instructive. So maybe we could within take turns, 1 minute, 2 minutes, and just quickly share what you would, advise a young woman. So maybe Ms. Hansatu will go first.
Okay, I'll just say that always find like minds that you can get to support and guide you. Sometimes going on that journey alone can be lonely. So I would say identify networks and groups that sort of align with what you are doing, go for knowledge, collaborate on different things, and then find effective ways to communicate whatever it is that matters to you in this regard. I'll keep it short and simple. I know the rest may have something to add.
Yeah, thank you very much, man. All right, so Mr. Lufunke.
Thanks for that, Hansatu. I think that's a good way to go. And I said something when I answered the question about the digital economy. I said that technology provides an opportunity that many people like Hansatu and I didn't have. For instance, Hansatu, when we started, there was no place for us to put our views on social media or LinkedIn. Now you go to meetings, you can There were meetings I attended in my 20s that I wish there were cameras and Facebook and LinkedIn, to promote what I'm doing, and so your passion will get you to some places, but you also need to put yourself out there. One advice is take good advantage of social media. Talk about the things that matter to you, and write about. We need to, encourage our young people to have a culture of writing, and sharing knowledge. When people know that you are distilling some, unique wisdom that they can learn from, they will listen to you, and you're expanding your reach that way.
All right, thank you very much. Ms. Omololu.
Yeah, I think I would first of all ask you to kind of identify someone who looks like where you're going, right? And I know this can be difficult because even when I started in gender, I didn't see any model that I could actually tailor myself after. But one thing I told myself was I was going to be extremely good at this. So I would say dig deep with knowledge, know at the most basic level what it is that you're doing, where you would like to go, who looks like that, and then find resources to learn and dig deep, sink your roots in deep. If you want to do mentorship courses, fine. If you want to volunteer, but be very clear about where you want to go, who looks like where you're going, that you could get very targeted advice and guidance for, especially if you plan to do it in a very quick time, and then learn as much as possible.
All right, thank you very much. I think I'd still like us to just, because of the importance of this conversation, to still sneak in one more question. So someone is asking, how do we plan to integrate young girls into the knowledge that there is more to being, more than just a mother or a wife, just like men are taught to be men while they were still boys. How do we help our girls in rural areas? And I guess I can also say, how do we structure mentorship for young women? So if we can also just briefly still, give some thoughts. So let's go at the same format again. So let's have Ms. Hansatu just
it's
speak
the
to
same
this.
thing. An individual can make a difference. You can gather it can be classmates, it can be your organization, it can be an NGO, whatever. I want us to just realize that there's individual action, there's collective action. You either solve a problem on your own, or you gather a collective of people or join a collective of organizations to do whatever it is that you want to do. And sometimes you can amplify a problem and it will attract the attention of others to help you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ma. So powerful. An individual can make a difference. Powerful. Thank you. All right, Ms. Olufunke.
Thank you. I was trying to look for one statement made by our own Dr. Obiezekwe today and just read it out so I don't paraphrase it. It says our daughters and granddaughters must never inherit battles and wars we should have won. The fact that we have this knowledge and you have this knowledge is an opportunity to begin to use that knowledge in the communities that we work in. I like the question we talked about, which says, well, when boys were boys, they were already taught how to be. When men were boys, they were already taught how to be men. So we should begin to start that. And it is by removing those traditional stereotypes. As we talk to girls, we say it unconsciously. So unconscious bias is something that we do without even knowing. We're beginning to tell the girls, to get ready for marriage, how to take care of their children. All these things are important, but we must begin to do awareness programs, even in communities that we serve. There are so many different town hall meetings and all this, rather than just talking about bringing water and bringing education to those. Can we use those opportunities, those environments to also begin to instill this thing? Show them role models, show them a Chimamanda Adichie. Don't even go far and start showing them Nelson Mandela or anybody. They show them a Chimamanda Adichie, show them an Amina Mohammed, living people. Don't talk about the ones that are dead. Show them an Obiezekwe, and show them examples of what's possible, where these people come from, where these women come from, and even amongst girls, and then be that example. Because we talk about these things a lot, but when we get in those spaces where the same people who suppress and repress, and show forth some of these biases, and meetings like this, conversations like this, we need to continue to talk about it. Help. Show them a Hansato, show them an Ibukun, and this is what is possible. I mean, years ago, Ibukun and I will probably be the ones taking notes or Hansato, while some other people will be the ones speaking, or serving tea.
All right. Thank you so much. You said show them Hansato, show them Ibukun. I think you missed show them an Odufunke also too. All right, so just a final parting shot from Ms. Ibukun. Your final thoughts briefly before we close out.
Fantastic. I feel like Funke has actually said a lot. I think the impact of modeling, which is really what she was saying, helping them to see people who have been successful in their own right. It may not even be as far as maybe an Obiezekwe, but just like she said, like us. And be mindful of privileges. And I'll quickly put in this story quick. There was a lady I worked with when I was in banking, and being in banking, there are opportunities for you to go around the country and do things, right? And for some reason I picked her. I said, you're going to go for this training, and it involved 3 cities. And I saw she was so excited, and I was like, what's going on? It's just a training. And she said, Ibukun, this is my first time ever of being on a plane. I've never traveled on a plane before. And I was deeply moved and humbled, because these are privileges that we have taken for granted, but could shape somebody's life differently. So it's in helping them to see you. It might not necessarily be an hobby, because they might not understand that level, but it's just letting them see that even as I'm a mother and as I'm a wife now, I am an achiever in what I'm doing. I'm solving some of the most complex gender problems in the world. And these are things that inspire and help these girls to grow.
Thank you. This brings us to the end of this, unfortunately, to the end of this interesting conversation. We wish we had more time to really share, but we have to bring it to a close. I want to say a big thank you to Ms. Hansato Adebite for being on this panel and sharing from the wealth of her knowledge with us. I want to say a big thank you to Ms. Olufunke Barua. I want to say a big thank you to Ms. Ibukun Omololu. We appreciate you. On behalf of eHealth Africa, thank you. I also want to thank Fozia for putting this together. We really appreciate it. And thank you to our audience, those streaming on LinkedIn. Those streaming on LinkedIn and those who joined here on Zoom. We really appreciate you. Thank you very much. Please follow us on all our social media handles to be updated with the work that we do. And you can also, go on LinkedIn and type the name of our panelists so that you can also, keep tabs with the work that they do in their own private spaces. Follow them. If you have questions, you can also ask them on their LinkedIn page. I'm sure they will be able to provide more answers and clarity, around this subject matter. So thank you very much, everyone, and have a lovely day.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.